Hi everyone, and welcome to this session on scaling up computational reproducibility practices in research organisations, i.e. how to influence change. I'm Michelle Barker from the Research Software Alliance, and co-leading this workshop with me and speaking later on, Neil Chu Hong from the Software Sustainability Institute and Carlos Martinez from the Netherlands eScience Centre. This is the rough agenda. We've got an hour and 15 minutes, so I'll talk for a little bit. Then there's a breakout group where you can reflect on what you've just learnt. Neil will talk for a bit, and then there's another breakout group, and then we'll end up with a bit of a summary. There's a link there to the slides, which are also linked off the information for this session in the RSECon main schedule. And there's also a collaborative notes document, which, because it's not public, we've stuck up over here on this piece of paper. I hope you can get to that and see it. And for those joining us online, it should be available on Canopy Chat. And it's also in the Slack session specifically for this workshop, the link to both the slides and the collaborative notes. So what we're doing today is sharing a piece of work that Neil and I co-authored a while ago called The Framework for Scaling Up Reproducibility Practices in Research Organisations, which was a piece of research and a report that we did for the Knowledge Exchange, which is a European consortium of a number of national digital infrastructure providers, including, for example, JISC here in the UK. The report that we did aims to assist research institutions to understand how reproducibility can be scaled up internally within their organisations, to support scaling up of practices by the majority of the community. So it recognised that the research community in general has gotten to the point where there are already quite a few early adopters of reproducibility practices. And the question was, how do we get that much more mainstream? How do we get to that tipping point where the majority are doing this? And it helps practitioners understand what types of practices are helpful. So there's two main resources that you can look at, the actual framework, which you'll be going through, which is quite a short document, and the much longer, 80-page plus report on approaches to scaling up reproducibility, which has a lot more detail, a lot of examples, case studies, etc. So we hope that the framework is useful to you, that it can be used by a range of stakeholders within a research organisation. So it might be staff wanting to influence their managers, their peers, their teams. It might be managers who want to support their staff in that part of the organisation. Or it might be leaders who are seeking to align bigger organisational change objectives throughout the organisation. And I wanted to emphasise that it's focused on how well an organisation, how well organised they are at scaling up reproducibility, i.e. it's about the access and coordination. It's not about the maturity of the reproducibility practices themselves that are being used. It's about how we, whatever the reproducibility practices are that are being used in that organisation, can be adopted by more people. So there's three parts to the framework, and I'm just going to talk you briefly through the first one, and then you'll have a chance to reflect on that in your own environment. So the first part is called organisational levels. So this work defines three levels of organisational levels along the top row there. So level one, you might be part of an organisation that has what we called pockets of excellence. That means that there are pockets of excellence related to reproducibility in small parts of the organisation, maybe in teams here and there, maybe a few random early career researchers who know each other and share an interest in this, might be part of a reproducibility bigger group, or the Carpentries, for example. Might be just within one professor's laboratory who's really passionate about this. So it's mostly bottom up. We just have smatterings of people who may or may not be connected a little and share this passion. Level 2, you might be in a research institution which we called partially coordinated, where we see within an organization a number of teams who might really be focusing on reproducibility practices. There might even be a faculty who is, or a few faculties, or it might be across disciplines that all of the people doing modeling, for example, share an interest in reproducibility, and that's how it's being partially coordinated across an organization. So there might be, in terms of the locus of leadership, that bottom row, some bottom-up still, really people who are passionate about it, encouraging their peers and teams, but also some top-down. So if it's at a faculty level, there might be some faculty policies or incentives. If it's being led across a number of disciplines, there might be a number of key staff in those disciplines who are really coordinating this interest in reproducibility. And the third level, you might be in an organization that has organizational level commitment. Very exciting. In fact, the university or research organization's organizational strategy at the highest level articulates strategic objectives around computational reproducibility for the institution as a whole, including the expectations of all of its staff. So there's lots of processes and structures across the whole institution that are coordinated to enable scalability and sustainability. So those are really crucial factors of level 3, that reproducibility, whatever trainings, incentives, policies, whatever it is, the processes and structures in place are scalable across the majority of the organization and sustainable long-term. There's a long-term strategy. So in terms of the locus leadership, this is obviously significant top-down leadership in terms of policies, etc., but bottom-up still remains important. So an organization might be at more than one of those levels at once. So for example, over here on the right-hand side, we've got the 3 blocks, level 1, level 2, and level 3 might all exist in an organization at once. That there's a whole level, high level coordination, but then there's still individual teams or groups somewhere else that are looking at different ways to think more innovatively about reproducibility. So don't constrain your thinking to thinking your organization only has to be at one of them. And different levels may be seen as beneficial by different stakeholders. So if there's a whole of coordination level 3, that's fantastic in that we get broad applicability, but it can constrain innovation because now everyone has to do things a certain way. Sometimes level 1 enables a lot more innovation or risk-taking. And just so you know, the report itself has a lot of case studies and examples of all of these, in particular some quite detailed case studies of Delft University in the Netherlands and the University of Reading here in the UK. So we'd like you to get into breakout groups now just for 10 minutes, partly to get to know each other. So we'll be in groups of 3 to 4. For the people who are online, you will be randomly assigned by Carlos into those groups. And for people in the room, if you can just organise yourself, just move around so you're in groups of 3 to 4. For 10 minutes, the action items that you're working on is to introduce yourself and then discuss which of those 3 levels you think your organisation is at. If you've forgotten the 3 levels, they're in the collaborative notes, they're in the slides, and if you also want to add any thoughts into the collaborative notes, you're welcome to. So please, just rearrange yourself and begin chatting.
All right. Hi, everyone. I see that you're all deep in discussion. Don't worry. There will be a much larger amount of time to kind of go into more detail to continue discussions you're having. This was a little bit of a warm-up to make sure that you're all introduced yourself and that you're all starting to talk about the different ways in which reproducibility is organized in your organizations. There were some really interesting questions that came up as I was wandering around the in-person groups around, how do you define organizations? What happens if you, as Michelle said, you have different levels? What are the sorts of things that might indicate good organization of reproducibility? So we're going to go into a little bit more of this as we're discussing some of the enablers that we can see for reproducibility in organizations. So what I'm going to go on to do now is discuss the categorization of some of these enablers, and talk about what it means to be scaling up reproducibility in each of these different categories. And then what we'll have is another set of breakout groups where you'll be discussing how things are going in your own organizations, perhaps ways that you can see things shifting to move up the levels. And then what we'll have is we'll have an interactive poll that everyone will be able to participate in to get feedback. So rather than each group giving feedback, we'll ask you to use a Slido. And the link for that Slido is in the notes, and I'll also post it round as well on the Slack, and it's in the canopy. So I'm talking about the enablers of scaling up reproducibility, and the work that we've done here is based around other work that's been done by Alexandra Davison and others around trying to create a taxonomy of different ways that academic institutions can improve their research practice. So what we've looked at is to see how that applies to reproducibility practice. And so they came up with these 7 different types of enablers. And what I'm going to do is walk you through each of these 7 to give you some examples of what types of reproducibility practices might be in each of these categories, so it becomes easier to understand how you identify them, and then also what it might look like as you move between the different levels in terms of the organization of them. So the first one is around tools, and tools are the sorts of things, they're the infrastructures, they are the support mechanisms, the technology that help with reproducibility. It's the kind of thing that we're talking about quite a lot at the Research Software Engineering Conference. It's things like code repositories, version control, digital repositories, and so on. And one of the things to look at here is thinking about the way that these tools are provided. So when we talk about level 1, pockets of excellence, that might be that these tools are really being run by individual groups. It might be one person in a group saying, hey, it'd be really useful if we used version control. I'll get that set up and help teach the other people in the group. At level 2, it might be that there is some good practice going on within individual departments or faculties. So perhaps the College of Medicine is running things where they are providing infrastructure to allow you to deposit data, but that's not generally available to the whole of the institution or university. And then at level 3, it's a commitment to these tools and infrastructures. It's sort of saying that these are things that we value and that are integrated with the other organizational tools. So when it comes to the levels of different coordination around tools, it's about thinking around what are the tools that are being provided by your organization and who's responsible for them and who essentially is kind of saying this is a good thing to be using. The next one, education and training. Again, something that we've heard a lot about at this conference. So things like carpentry's training. If you're in the UK Reproducibility Network provide training. But then it's also about how this gets incorporated into individual courses and what's being provided to people who are in research groups, who are in professional services, and so on. And again, it's very similar. At the first level, what we might be seeing is that there are some people who are providing that training to their peers. Perhaps you know you're in an institution where you have heard about the carpentries, but really it's all being run by 1 or 2 instructors who do it because they care about it. At level 2, where it's partially coordinated, it will be that some of the departments will have bought into this. They have decided that perhaps they are running training on a regular basis to perhaps all of the students that are in that department when they come in for their induction week. Or at level 3, there's a real commitment to understanding how to organize training and how to identify the training that's required for an entire institution, because again, it's understanding why that's a benefit to the organization. So perhaps it becomes mandatory to take some of this training because it is good practice for reproducibility, but at the very least, training is being provided by the organization that is open to all. So then thinking about another category, and that's the one of incentives. So when we think about incentives, there's different types of incentives that we can consider. So some of them are about driving individuals' satisfaction. So perhaps there are things that are part of hiring practices or promotion criteria. Perhaps it's about rewarding good practice through prizes at your institution. But then there's also around the sorts of things that are incentivizing practice at a more system level. So perhaps providing resources to support making papers reproducible, giving grants for open research, and so on. So in terms of incentives, again, what you're looking at is considering in your institutions, your organizations, who is it that is doing anything to help incentivize your work towards reproducibility? What are the different things that you think might help move your organization up the level? And who is it that you might need to talk to discuss whether or not they would support this? And so this goes all the way through from at the bottom level, perhaps what you have is you have some people who are really just advocating for and cheerleading reproducibility practices, all the way up to people being recognized by being promoted within an organization solely because they are doing good reproducibility work. This is the category that I often slip up on because it's using terms from more general research into different kinds of organizational enablers. So when I think about modeling, I think about computational modeling. When other people think about modeling, they'll think of other sorts of modeling, perhaps like clay modeling and so on. Here, what I mean by modeling is, are there people that you can look up to and imitate? So are there other people who are in the organization who you can model yourself on? And so some examples of this might be whether you have reproducibility champions or advocates. Maybe your organization is running a reproducibility group that's running events. And again, think about the sorts of levels in which this happens. Is this really just a few individuals who are recognized by other people in your group as the person to talk to when you want to talk about reproducibility? Or is it that the organization is creating a champions scheme in the same way that they might create a data stewards scheme or a GDPR champion scheme? So have a think about who's organizing these people that you can look to for advice and mentoring. Another category of enablers for reproducibility is review and feedback. So what are the sorts of resources that you have to get feedback on whether your practices are helping to enable reproducibility? So things like code review sessions, journal clubs that are discussing papers. There are a lot of initiatives like registered reports, peer review, peer community and so on, that are around getting more input into the work that you're doing. And think about how those are being organized and championed within the university or research organization. Is it that it's just a research team that has decided this is a good thing to do and is encouraging it? Is it that there is cross-pollination of this across different departments and teams or projects to get a wider set of input? Or is it that the organization as a whole has strategies in place for helping provide feedback, perhaps supporting additional resources to allow feedback to happen? Another one is around expert involvement and advice. And this is really what this conference is all about. So this is about access to the expertise that is important for helping support reproducibility. So it's access to the data stewards, to the research software engineers, to the infrastructure managers who can all help in terms of improving reproducibility. So again, have a think about in your organizations, how is this being done currently? So do you have access to data stewards, to research software engineers, to specialist librarians? How easy is it to find that? how many people are being supported, where are they located, and is there basically dedicated effort to provide this kind of expertise to the people that are working on different types of research. And then, I think this is the final one, I've lost count. There is the enabler, which is around policies and procedures. So this is putting in place the guidance, the restrictions perhaps, around supporting reproducibility. And this is normally around organizational or departmental policy. So it might be around how you share your research data. It might be around how you license your software. It might be what you have to do to create metadata records for your data. And so in an organization, it might be that what you have is you have no policies, and it's up to you as individuals to decide that you want to do this by following policies set by external organizations or perhaps groups that are providing guidance. It might be that there is input from your department or your project that helps you understand which processes are beneficial to you, or it might be that your university is setting and talking to all of its kind of staff and students to decide what processes work best for that organization. So those are all kind of different levels of enabler, and it's a way of kind of thinking around the different types of things that help support reproducibility. And the kind of key thing here is this is about promoting discussion. So one of the reasons why we've created this framework is to make it easier for people like yourselves to go in and start talking to other people in your organizations about what's currently happening and where you would like to get to. And so the other thing that I'm going to highlight is this assessment worksheet, which is linked from the notes as well, which allows you to just kind of capture some of this information and structure some of this discussion. It's based on a similar kind of worksheet for digital preservation by the Digital Preservation Coalition around digital preservation, but we've extended it for reproducibility in general. And the idea here is that it can give you a sense of where you are as an organization just now, or where you perceive your organization to be, and then to think about which are the things that you need to concentrate on, and which are the things that you want to move a little bit, but perhaps not right now. So it gives you a talking point about where you're doing well and where you're doing less well, and understanding what you want to do next and helping to prioritize. Okay, so we're going to go into a second set of breakouts. And again, just in your groups, you should hopefully have now all introduced yourselves. But what we'd like you to do is talk about one of these types of enablers that your organization is doing well at, and why you think you're doing well at that. And then also one enabler that your organization is challenged by. So are there any things that you think should be being done better, but there are different reasons why they might not be? And share that amongst yourselves. It would be really interesting to hear if there are any things which are shared amongst a number of people in your group. If you have examples that you think would be really valuable to share more generally to the rest of the people participating in the workshop, please do put them into the collaborative notes. And then after we've had this discussion, we'll be doing a Slido which will help you to record some of these different enablers and how they're being handled within your organization. So onwards to the breakouts. All right, everyone. I can see that you're all still deep in conversation, and that's a really good sign. I think one of the key things that we want you all to get out of this workshop is simply to be able to share some of your experiences and to learn from what's happening in other organizations. So if you've made some good contacts as part of this discussion, keep on going, collaborate, share those stories with other people. What we're going to do now is we're going to go into the feedback session of this. We have 3 and a bit questions for you. So if you go to the Slido poll, I can see that some of you are already there. You can use the QR code or go to slido.com and use the number 1173036. What we'd like you to do, first of all, is say which of those 7 enablers is your organization most challenged by. So your organization might be challenged by many of these different enabler categories. What we would like you to put in is the one that you believe your organization is most challenged by. This is also where I try and do a quick head count to try to work out how many people we're expecting to fill out. So yeah, we're up at 29 responses so far, so I think there's still time for a few more responses. So it's really interesting that incentives is coming up as the main one here. Hopefully, some of you will have had some good examples of how those challenges that have been overcome. If you do have those, please do put them in the collaborative notes to share. But hopefully also there will be examples of other people at this conference who've been able to address the things around organization of incentives. Second is policy and procedures. That's a really interesting one because there is a lot of work that's going on in this space. There'll be a little trailer for some of this work at the end of this workshop, but you'll also see at some of the other talks and sessions at RSECon examples of policies and procedures being put into practice. And then review and feedback. So it's always a classic one of people feeling that they're not getting enough feedback. And I think maybe one of the things to think about is what could you do, because this is often the one that's easiest for individuals to help act on. What can you do to help remove some of the challenges towards providing review and feedback? Okay, second question. Which of the 7 enablers is your organization doing well at? So in your discussions, what did you find to be the things that you were well organized in as an organization? I guess you can abstain. Okay, it's settling out. And so here, so one good thing here is that we're not seeing a response which is going, what are you doing really badly at incentives? What are you doing really good at incentives? We do have pretty much a flipped set of answers here. So education and training and tools are the 2 categories of enablers where people in this workshop think their organizations are doing well at. And that is potentially because of the emphasis that's been given to things like training and accessibility of training, and the fact that in general we are a community that likes producing and supporting tools. So that's really good. I think what's really interesting as well is that modeling and mentoring and expert advice are coming up next, and maybe that's the area where we might be thinking about, we're doing okay on this, how might we do even better in providing support and kind of like giving value as an organization to modeling and mentoring and expert involvement. Because in some sense, that is driving forward all of the work that's being done at RSECon. Okay, so those were the sort of two things that we asked you to discuss. But this is a workshop, and we want you to do a little bit more work. So the last question is, which of these enablers do you think there might be a quick win for your organization? So where is it that there's something where perhaps there is a challenge, but you can see a relatively short-term way of improving this particular enabler? Because these are the things where actually you can go forward, and if you understand the right people, if you understand the right data or evidence to provide, if you can give the right story about the impact, it is something that you can take forward. And that is perhaps something where you can draw on resources from other groups, things like the UK Reproducibility Network if you're in the UK, or if you are in other countries. There are a lot of countries that have their own reproducibility networks to get support to talk to your organization to move things forward. And so for this, so incentives is coming up. That's really good. So if incentives is coming up as the biggest challenge, but it's also the thing that you think there could be the quickest wins, that's a perfect combination. So one of the things I think to think about as you go out of this workshop is who would you need to speak to? Who would you need to collaborate with to get this quick win on incentives? So what is the thing that you would like to see changed, and who are the people that you need to work with to make that happen? All right, so this is the thing to take forward. We've talked about this framework and the wider set of information that kind of goes in the report. What we'd like you to consider as you kind of go forward is who do you want to share this information with? So who is it that you think will be the right person to talk to in your organization or perhaps outside your organization to help improve the support for reproducibility within your organization? So it might be one of your colleagues, it might be your supervisor or your boss, it might be someone within one of the leadership teams in your organization, it might be a funder. Have a think about who are the people who you need to talk to start making things happen, and then you have our blessings to go and do that, because you are now all empowered. So I'm going to hand back over to Michelle to take you through some additional things that you can do.
Thanks, Neil. Just for the last 10 minutes, we're going to talk about, yes, where to from here. What could be next steps, and what are some resources that might help you? So as Neil said, the next steps are really up to you. The framework was really written in a way that is designed to empower people at all levels of an organization to think about how they could use this resource, be it only within their team, or within their laboratory, or their faculty, or perhaps across the whole of the organization. So the documents that we referenced, that we wrote as part of this research, have a lot more details. There's lots of great examples of what other organizations are doing. There's academic references, published papers supporting some of this. There's also some sections on how could you really use this, how would you prioritize what you want to do going forward, what might be some of the other types of people you need to involve in some of these conversations. So there's a lot more in the full 80+ page report if you're interested to follow up. And Neil and I will also be doing a public webinar on this for Knowledge Exchange probably later this year. So if you want to try and catch that, or encourage your peers to catch that, then follow the Knowledge Exchange social media to know when that's coming up. We also wanted to give you some other resources that could be useful. Neil's emphasised the reproducibility networks, which are fantastic. Some of them are things like reproducibility. We've talked about in the examples. But given that, as Neil said, one of the second most challenging areas was policies and procedures, we wanted to share with you some work that is a working group led by my organisation, the Research Software Alliance and the Research Data Alliance. So Carlos is just going to spend the last few minutes introducing you to that.
Thanks, Michelle. So I just want to talk to you about the Pro4RS, or Policies in Research Organization for Research Software Working Group, which is a joint RDA and RISA working group. It's a group created between both organizations because it's something that is important for the data world, but for the software world as well. So it makes sense to try to join forces in this. And it is just a list of all the people who are involved in co-chairing the group. So it's a joint collaboration, quite international. So that's also trying to get perspectives from around the globe. I have a slide on the motivation, although given that the results on the poll, I think that it's clear that you see the importance of this, right? We want this group to collect policies and to give recommendations on policies for research software, because we know that good practices are important and we want to get recognition for them, and we want sustainability and reproducibility to be part of those good practices. Because in the end, all of this leads to better research, and that's what I think it's something that is almost goes without saying in this group. How to get involved is maybe the more important part. This is a working group between RDA and RISA, so you can find all the details on the working group page at the RDA and RISA. Both have a landing page for the group, which lead to the same information. The working group has the different activities, so we organize some webinars and some feedback collection, so you can just join the working group and you can collaborate with us. That we're very open for more people to contribute to it. Whenever there's something new happening, recommendations coming from the working group, but also when we're trying to collect more feedback, you can follow the progress of the group through RISA newsletter or the RISA Slack as well. And if you find this important, relevant, like Michelle said, share this with people that are interested in this in your organization, with your colleagues, with your bosses, with your people who also contribute to your organization in different ways, and just raise the awareness of the importance of policies for research software. And I think that's all I had to say. So I'll give the word back to Michelle.
Thank you, Carlos. It's really worth looking at the database of policies that working group has put together, policies that support research software. A lot of them are around things like licensing, but certain intellectual policy. But there's a few around tenure and promotion. So if you want an example to show your organization that some of your peers have actually done this and implemented, there are a few examples there. And if you have other policies that would be great to include in the database, there's a link to add to it as well. So that's it from us. Thank you very much for your energy and enthusiasm. For those of you who've contributed to collaborative notes, thank you for sharing your experiences of challenges and what's working well, so that everyone who's joined us today online in the room can benefit from what everyone else has to say. So yes, I think it's time to go to lunch now. So enjoy and take this forward and make research more computationally reproducible. Thank you.